He stood in the economy line, wore a simple gray sweater and worn khakis, his boarding pass clutched in weathered hands that had once controlled aircraft worth millions. The young gate agents were busy with their phones, barely glancing up as passengers shuffled forward. But what they didn't know was that the faded wings pin on the old man's collar told a story that would change everything. And when the captain finally heard his name echo through the cockpit, radio, the entire terminal would fall. Silent. Welcome to those who left a trace. Before we dive into this extraordinary story of hidden legacy, forgotten heroes, and the moment when respect was finally restored, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe that some stories deserve to be remembered no matter how much time has passed, hit that subscribe button to support content that honors those who soared above the clouds and served with dignity long before most of us were born. Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport Terminal C was bustling with the usual chaos of a Friday evening. Travelers hurried past with rolling luggage. Flight announcements echoed over the intercom, and gate agents prepared for the final departures of the day. Gate 47 served flights to Denver, and the line of passengers stretched nearly 30 feet from the check-in counter. Behind the desk, 3 young employees worked the shift. Jennifer, 22, fresh from Airline Training Academy, Marcus, 20. For studying business at night school, and Sarah, 19, working part-time. While finishing her associate's degree, they had been trained in customer service protocols, but nothing had prepared them for what they were about to witness. At exactly 5:45 p.m., an elderly man joined the economy line for Flight 1847 to Denver. He moved slowly, but deliberately, his steps measured and careful, like someone who had learned to navigate crowded spaces with patience. He wore a simple gray cardigan over a white collared shirt, khaki pants that had been pressed but showed years of wear, and black leather shoes that had been polished to a modest shine. His hair was silver and thinning, combed neatly to the side, and his face bore the kind of deep lines that came from decades of squinting into bright horizons. What most passengers didn't notice, but a train I might catch, was the way he carried himself, to straight posture, despite his age, the way his eyes automatically cataloged emergency exits and crowd patterns, the small golden wings pin on his collar, so faded with age that it barely caught the fluorescent light, and the way he held his boarding pass, not crumpled in his fist like most travelers, but flat and organized like someone accustomed to handling important documents under pressure. Jennifer noticed him first as he approached her station. She looked up from her computer screen with the practiced smile she had been taught in training. Good evening, sir. Boarding pass. An ID, please. The old man handed over his documents with both hands and spoke quietly. Thank you, Miss. Flight 1847 to Denver, seat 32F. Jennifer scanned his boarding pass and frowned slightly, looking at her screen. Then back at him. Sir, this shows you're in a middle seat in the very back of the aircraft. Are you sure you don't want to upgrade to an exit row or maybe premium economy for just $49 extra? The old man studied his boarding pass for a moment, then looked back at Jennifer with patient eyes. No, thank you, miss. This seat will be fine. Jennifer shrugged and continued processing his documents. That'll be $25 for first check bag. So the old man reached into his wallet and carefully counted out exact change, mostly ones and fives. Jennifer watched with barely concealed impatience as he sorted through the bills. Sir, do you have a card? This is taking a while, and we have a long line behind you. Marcus, the second gate agent, noticed the hold-up and walked over with a slight edge of irritation. Sir, we need to keep the line moving. Jennifer's right. If you can't afford the bag fee or an upgrade, maybe you should consider budget airlines next time. They might be more suitable for your situation. The old man's face remained calm, but something flickered in his eyes as he quietly finished counting his money. I have exact change, thank you, he said simply, placing $25 in small bills on the counter. Sarah, the youngest agent, joined the conversation. Having overheard the exchange, she looked at the old man's worn clothes and tired appearance and made an assumption that would haunt her for years to come. Sir, she said with condescension barely hidden behind false concern, of money is tight. There are senior discounts on some flights. Maybe next time you should book with advance notice to get better deals instead of showing up expecting premium treatment when you can't afford it. The old man accepted his boarding pass and bag claim ticket with the same quiet dignity he had maintained throughout the interaction. Thank you, he said simply. Have a good evening. Then he walked toward the gate leaving behind 3 young employees who had no idea they had just dismissed someone whose service had quite literally helped shape the aviation industry they knew nothing about. As passengers continued to board Flight 1847, the gate agents returned to their routine tasks, processing boarding passes, checking IDs, and making the standard announcements. But 20 minutes before departure, something unusual happened to Captain of Flight 1847, Captain Rodriguez, a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience, emerged from the jetway and approached the gate desk. This almost never happened. Captains typically remained in the cockpit during boarding, unless there was an emergency. Captain Rodriguez looked concerned as he approached Jennifer's station. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the authority that came with decades of command experience. "I need to ask you about one of our passengers. Did an elderly gentleman check in tonight? Probably traveling alone, possibly with military bearing." Jennifer looked confused and slightly defensive. "Yes, sir. There was an older man. Why is there a problem? Did he cause some kind of issue?" "No issue," Captain Rodriguez replied, his expression growing more serious. "I just received a very unusual radio communication. Air traffic control contacted me directly about one of our passengers. They asked me to personally ensure he receives appropriate courtesy. Apparently, this gentleman's name triggered some kind of alert in the aviation database. Can you tell me his name and seat assignment?" Jennifer pulled up the passenger manifest and read from her screen: seat 32F, William James Patterson, age 76, traveling alone. Captain Rodriguez's face went pale as he stared at the name on the screen, William J. Patterson. He repeated quietly, "Are you absolutely certain that's the name?" "Yes, sir," Jennifer confirmed. "Why? What's wrong with Mr. Patterson?" Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, processing information that made his hands tremble slightly. "Ladies," he said, finally, his voice heavy with something between awe and regret, "do any of you know who William Patterson is?" The 3 gate agents shook their heads, looking confused and slightly worried that they might have made some kind of mistake. Captain Rodriguez took a deep breath and continued. "William Patterson isn't just any passenger. He's Colonel William Patterson, retired United States Air Force, one of the most decorated pilots in military aviation history. He flew F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam, conducted covert reconnaissance missions over Laos and Cambodia, and later became a test pilot for experimental aircraft that most people will never know existed. He's credited with innovations in cockpit, designed to have saved thousands of civilian lives, and his combat record includes missions so classified that most details are still buried in government files." The gate agent stood in stunned silence as Captain Rodriguez continued. After the military, he transitioned to civilian aviation, became a captain for major airlines, and flew commercial routes for 25 years, never had an accident, never had a serious incident, trained hundreds of pilots who are still flying today. The wings pin he's wearing isn't some generic aviation jewelry. It's a presentation pin given only to pilots who have demonstrated exceptional service to both military and civilian aviation. Jennifer felt her stomach drop as she remembered her interaction with the elderly man. "Sir," she said quietly, "he seemed like just another budget traveler. We might have been a little impatient with him." Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. "I need to know exactly what happened during check-in, because air traffic control is very interested in ensuring Colonel Patterson receives the respect his service has earned." Sarah, the youngest agent, spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "We suggested he try budget airlines. Said he should book in advance. If he couldn't afford upgrades, Marcus added we thought he was just another senior citizen trying to get special treatment because he was paying with small bills." Jennifer finished. "We assumed he couldn't afford a better seat or baggage fees." Captain Rodriguez closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his expression was one of profound disappointment. "Ladies," he said quietly, "you just treated one of the most accomplished pilots in aviation history like a burden, like someone whose presence was inconvenient. Colonel Patterson has forgotten more about flying than most people will ever learn. He's flown in combat situations where one mistake meant death. He's tested aircraft that had never been flown before, and he saved more lives than you could count, and you treated him like he was wasting your time." The weight of their mistake began to settle on the 3 young, employees Jennifer's training had taught her about customer service, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Marcus felt his business school confidence crumble as he realized he had insulted a genuine American hero. Sarah, the part-time student who had suggested budget airlines, felt tears beginning to form as she understood the magnitude of her assumptions. Captain Rodriguez continued. Colonel Patterson could afford first class on any airline he chooses to fly, but he doesn't seek special treatment. He never has. That's the mark of true character. He's earned the right to be treated with dignity, not because of his wallet, but because of his service to this country. And in aviation, the fact that he paid with small bills probably means he's careful with money, not because he lacks it, but because he learned the value of everything through decades of sacrifice. Air traffic control contacted me, Captain Rodriguez explained, because Colonel Patterson's name is flagged in the aviation database not as a security risk, but as someone who deserves recognition. His service record is extraordinary, and the FAA maintains a list of legendary pilots whose contributions to aviation safety deserve acknowledgement. When his name appeared on our passenger manifest, it triggered an automatic notification. The captain paused and delivered news that made the situation infinitely worse. Ladies, I need to inform you that this conversation is being recorded. Air traffic control has requested a full report on Colonel Patterson's treatment during check-in, and your interaction with him will be reviewed by airport management and possibly by the airline's corporate office. Jennifer felt her career prospects dimming as Captain Rodriguez continued. There's more. Colonel Patterson isn't traveling to Denver for vacation. He's flying there to attend the funeral of his former wingman, another Vietnam veteran who died last week. Colonel Patterson is one of only 3 surviving members of his original squadron. He made this trip despite his own health issues because he promised his fallen comrades that he would honor their service as long as he was able. The 3 gate agents stood in horrified silence as the full scope of their mistake became clear. They had treated a war hero with disrespect on his way to bury a friend. They had assumed the worst about someone whose service had helped preserve their freedom to work in a peaceful airport rather than a combat zone. Captain Rodriguez looked at each of them in turn. I'm going to board the aircraft now, he said, and I'm going to personally apologize to Colonel Patterson on behalf of this airline. I'm also going to upgrade him to first class and ensure he receives a courtesy he should have received from the beginning. But the damage to this airline's reputation and possibly to your careers has already been done. As Captain Rodriguez walked toward the jetway, the 3 gate agents were left to process the magnitude of their error. Jennifer realized that her customer service training had failed to teach her the most important lesson: how to recognize when she was in the presence of greatness. Marcus understood that his business school education meant nothing without the wisdom to treat all people with dignity. Sarah grasped that her part-time job had just taught her a lesson about assumptions that would stay with her for the rest of her life. 20 minutes later, as Flight 1847 pushed back from the gate, Captain Rodriguez made an announcement that passengers would remember for years. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Before we depart, I want to take a moment to recognize a very special passenger traveling with us today. Colonel William Patterson, seated in first class, is a decorated Vietnam veteran test pilot, an aviation pioneer whose service has contributed to the safety of every commercial flight you will ever take. Colonel Patterson, we are honored to have you aboard, and thank you for your service to our country and to aviation. The cabin erupted in spontaneous applause as passengers turned to see the elderly man who had been upgraded from seat 32F to first class. Colonel Patterson acknowledged the recognition with a modest nod, but his eyes showed the deep emotion of someone who had carried his service quietly for decades without seeking acknowledgement. After landing in Denver, Colonel Patterson was met at the gate by airport security, not because he was in trouble, but because the airport manager wanted to personally apologize for the treatment he had received during check-in. The manager, a former Navy pilot himself, recognized Colonel Patterson's name and understood the significance of his service. Sir, he said, extending his hand, I want to personally apologize for the discourtesy you experienced tonight. It does not reflect the values of this airport or our respect for veterans like yourself. Colonel Patterson shook the manager's hand with the firm grip of someone who had once controlled fighter jets in combat situations. Young man, he said, quietly, I've experienced far worse than impatient gate agents. The important thing is that people learn from their mistakes and do better next time. Those employees are young, they'll grow from this experience. But the story didn't end with apologies. Within hours of the incident, a passenger who had witnessed the captain's announcement posted about it on social media. The post went viral as people shared stories of their own encounters with hidden heroes who had been dismissed or overlooked because they didn't fit expected stereotypes. The airline conducted a full investigation of the incident, not to punish the gate agents, but to understand how their training could be improved to prevent similar situations. The 3 employees were required to attend sensitivity training and workshops on military history and aviation heritage. They learned about the sacrifices made by previous generations to secure the freedoms they enjoyed. Jennifer discovered that customer service meant more than processing transactions efficiently. It meant recognizing humanity in every person she encountered. Marcus learned that business success required more than profit margins. It required understanding the stories and struggles of the people who made commerce possible. Sarah understood that assumptions based on appearance or economic status could blind her to the extraordinary people who walked among her every day. 6 months later, the 3 gate agents received an unexpected letter. It was from Colonel Patterson, who had learned about their remedial training and wanted to share something with them. The letter read, in part, "You made a mistake that evening, but mistakes are how we learn. I hope you understand that my disappointment was not with your youth or inexperience, but with a lost opportunity to connect across generations. Those of us who served did so, hoping that future generations would learn from our experiences and build a better world." The letter continued, "I invite you to visit the Aviation Museum in Dallas, where my aircraft and those of my fellow veterans are displayed, not to shame you for your mistake, but to help you understand the history that brought us all to that airport terminal. That evening, aviation is more than a business. It's a testament to human courage, innovation, and the willingness to risk everything for the advancement of civilization." All 3 accepted his invitation and spent a day learning about the history of flight from the Wright brothers through modern commercial aviation. They saw Colonel Patterson's uniform displayed alongside his medals and commendations. They read accounts of his test flights in experimental aircraft that pushed the boundaries of what was possible, and they learned about the missions he had flown in Vietnam that had saved countless American lives. The museum visit changed their perspective forever. Jennifer realized that every passenger she encountered carried stories and experiences that deserve respect regardless of their appearance or economic status. Marcus understood that true leadership meant serving others, especially those who had served before him. Sarah learned that humility was a foundation of wisdom and that assumptions were the enemy of understanding. Colonel Patterson attended their museum visit and spent the afternoon sharing stories not about his own heroism, but about the teamwork and sacrifice that made aviation possible. He spoke about mechanics who worked through the night to keep aircraft flying, about air traffic controllers who guided planes safely through dangerous weather, and about the countless unnamed individuals whose dedication made modern aviation the safest form of transportation ever developed. The 3 former gate agents became advocates for veteran recognition programs at their airport. They worked to establish protocols for identifying and honoring military veterans and aviation pioneers who traveled through their terminal. They created displays highlighting the contributions of veterans to aviation safety, and they partnered with local veteran organizations to ensure that heroes like Colonel Patterson received appropriate recognition. Years later, when Jennifer became a supervisor, she made sure that all new employees learned about Colonel Patterson and the lesson his story taught about looking beyond appearances to recognize the extraordinary people who walk among us. Marcus eventually left the airline industry, but carried the lessons of that evening into his business career, always remembering to treat every person with dignity regardless of their circumstances. Sarah finished her degree and became a teacher specializing in military history and aviation. She told Colonel Patterson's story to her students not to shame anyone, but to illustrate the importance of recognizing the hidden heroes in their communities. She taught them that greatness often travels in modest packages, and that assumptions based on appearance can blind us to the remarkable people we encounter every day. Colonel Patterson continued to fly occasionally as a passenger, but he also began speaking at aviation events and veteran gatherings, sharing his experiences and encouraging young people to pursue careers in aviation. He never mentioned the incident at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport in his speeches, but those who knew the story understood that it had become part of his legacy, a reminder that respect is earned through service but should be given freely to all. The airline created a training program based on Colonel Patterson's story, teaching employees to look beyond the surface and recognize that every passenger carries their own history of struggle, triumph, and service. The program became a model for other airlines and helped establish industry standards for treating all passengers with dignity regardless of their appearance or economic status. The story of Colonel Patterson and the gate agents became a case study in business schools and customer service training programs, illustrating how assumptions can damage relationships and how respect and humility can transform mistakes into opportunities for growth. The incident reminded everyone in the aviation industry that they were part of a legacy built by heroes who deserved recognition, not just for their past service, but for their ongoing presence in the community. Colonel Patterson lived for several more years after the incident, attending veteran reunions, mentoring young pilots, and quietly supporting aviation education programs. He never sought publicity for his service, but he became symbol of the hidden heroes who walk among us, carrying their contributions to society with quiet dignity. When Colonel Patterson passed away at age 81, his funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched, including the 3 former gate agents who had learned so much from their encounter with him. The airline provided an honor guard, and the airport lowered its flags to half-staff in recognition of his service to aviation and his country. The eulogy at his funeral was delivered by a pilot he had trained decades earlier, who spoke about Colonel Patterson's technical expertise, his courage under pressure, and most importantly, his humility and willingness to share his knowledge with others. The speaker noted that Colonel Patterson had never boasted about his accomplishments, but had quietly continued to serve through teaching, mentoring, and supporting others long after his formal retirement. Today, the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport displays a plaque in Terminal C near Gate 47 honoring Colonel William J. Patterson and all veterans who have contributed to aviation safety and innovation. Plaque includes his photograph in uniform alongside a simple inscription that reads, "Some heroes were wings, others were uniforms. All deserve our recognition and respect." The 3 former gate agents still work in aviation, though in different capacities. They remain friends and often speak together at training seminars, sharing their story as a reminder that respect should be the default response to every human encounter. They emphasize that Colonel Patterson's legacy was not just his aviation achievements, but his gracious response to their mistake and his willingness to turn a negative experience into a teaching moment. Visitors to the Aviation Museum in Dallas can still see Colonel Patterson's uniform and medals, but they can also read letters from the young people he mentored, testimonials from passengers whose flights he made safer, and accounts of his contributions to aviation technology that continue to save lives today. His display includes a section about the importance of recognizing veterans and the stories they carry, whether they wear uniforms or travel in civilian clothes. The story continues to inspire people in the aviation industry and beyond, serving as a reminder that heroism takes many forms and that the most profound acts of service are often performed by people who seek no recognition for their efforts. Colonel Patterson's example taught everyone who encountered him that true greatness lies not in demanding respect, but in earning it through service and maintaining it through humility. So now I ask you, have you ever encountered someone like Colonel Patterson, someone whose quiet presence carried the weight of extraordinary experiences, someone who served without seeking recognition, whose dignity shone through even when faced with disrespect? Share their name in the comments. Tell us how they showed you what true character looks like. Because of those who left a trace, we believe the most powerful stories aren't always the loudest, they're the ones carried by ordinary people who did extraordinary things and then returned to live among us with the same humility that marked their service. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes come in all forms and ages. Subscribe to support more stories that honor those who served in the skies and on the ground. And the next time you encounter an elderly person in an airport or anywhere else, remember that you might be in the presence of someone who once soared above the clouds in defense of freedom. You might be looking at a hero who simply never told you their story because they were too humble to think it mattered, but it does. Every story of service matters. Every act of courage deserves recognition, and every quiet hero deserves to be remembered not with fanfare, but with the simple respect they earned through their willingness to risk everything for something greater than themselves.